My sister hit my son in the middle of her live stream, and my mother said I was too emotional. Everyone watched it happen. Then my husband stepped forward and said one sentence that ended everything. But let me back up, because you need to understand how we got here. My name is Grace Holloway, and 3 months ago, I had what everyone in Las Vegas called the perfect life. My husband, Cameron, owned half the commercial real estate on the Strip. We lived in a glass penthouse in Summerlin with views that made visitors cry. My sister, Vanessa, was a lifestyle influencer with 2 million followers who documented her authentic journey while living in our guest house rent-free. My mother, Diane, split her time between our pool and Vanessa's comment section, managing her career like a stage mom who never got her own spotlight. And my son, Tyler, my brilliant, sensitive 8-year-old, was the center of my entire universe. I thought I knew my family. I thought the tension was normal, the kind of thing that happens when money flows too easily and everyone forgets what struggle feels like. Vanessa's little comments about my parenting, my mother's way of always taking her side, Cameron's long hours that stretched later every month. I told myself it was fine. I told myself I was grateful. I told myself that keeping the peace was more important than keeping score. I was wrong about everything. It started the morning of Vanessa's Summer Refresh livestream event. She'd been planning it for weeks, transforming our backyard into what she called a wellness sanctuary, with crystal installations, organic juice bars, and meditation pods that cost more than most people's cars. She'd invited 50 micro-influencers, 3 local news cameras, and approximately 7,000 online viewers to watch her unveil her new product line. Cameron had funded the whole thing without asking me, the same way he funded everything Vanessa touched. When I'd mentioned maybe scaling back, he'd looked at me like I'd suggested kicking puppies. She's family, Grace. She's building something real. Real. That word sat in my stomach like poison that morning while I watched Vanessa direct her assistant to move the meditation pods 6 inches to the left, then 6 inches back. Tyler was supposed to stay inside during the event, but he'd wanted to see Aunt Vanessa's pretty lights, and I'd been too tired to fight him. Too tired from another night of Cameron coming home at 2 in the morning smelling like expensive perfume that wasn't mine. Too tired from my mother's daily phone calls asking why I couldn't be more supportive of Vanessa's dreams. Too tired from pretending that everything in my perfect life wasn't slowly crumbling into something I no longer recognized. The live stream started at noon. Vanessa wore white linen that probably cost $4,000 and looked like she'd just returned from finding herself in Bali. She talked about alignment and intention and radical self-care, while her followers flooded the comments with heart emojis and messages about how she'd changed their lives. I watched from the kitchen window while Tyler colored at the breakfast bar, and I felt something dark uncurl in my chest. Not jealousy, exactly, something closer to recognition. The way Vanessa tilted her head when she laughed, the way she touched the arm of her cameraman, the way she glanced toward the house when she thought no one was looking. Tyler knocked over his juice box. It was an accident, the kind that happens 100 times in childhood. Purple liquid spread across the marble counter and dripped onto the floor. He froze, his eyes going wide with that particular panic of an 8-year-old who knows he's messed up. I was already moving toward him with paper towels when Vanessa's voice cut through the open patio door. "Tyler, what did you do?" She'd somehow noticed from outside, even in the middle of her live stream, even with 50 people watching her every move. She stormed inside so fast, her assistant nearly dropped the ring light. The live stream was still rolling. 7,000 people watched her face shift from serene wellness guru to something sharp and cold as she grabbed Tyler's arm. "You're always making messes. You're always in the way. Do you have any idea how important today is?" I saw her hand come up. I saw Tyler flinch. I saw the slap connect with his cheek, not hard enough to leave a mark, but hard enough to make a sound that echoed in our massive kitchen, hard enough that my son's eyes filled with tears he was too proud to let fall. And 7,000 people watched it happen in real time. I moved without thinking. 1 second I was frozen at the sink, the next I was between them, pushing Vanessa back with more force than I'd used for anything in years. Get away from him! Get out of this house right now! Vanessa's eyes went wide, but not with shame, with calculation. She glanced at her phone, still streaming, still recording, and her expression shifted into something that looked like hurt. Grace, I barely touched him. You're overreacting. You always overreact when it comes to Tyler. The gaslighting was so smooth it nearly worked. For a split second, I questioned myself. Had I seen it wrong? Was I being too sensitive? Then I looked at Tyler's red cheek and his trembling lip, and something inside me turned to steel. Get out. My mother appeared in the doorway like she'd been summoned. She'd been outside schmoozing with Vanessa's sponsors, probably. She took in the scene with one quick glance and somehow made her decision in the space of a breath. Grace, what is wrong with you? Vanessa was just correcting him. He ruined her entire setup. Do you have any idea how much this event cost? The betrayal of it hit me like a physical blow. My own mother, watching my sister hit my son, and her first instinct was to defend the slap? Not to comfort Tyler, not to acknowledge what had just happened in front of thousands of witnesses, just to protect Vanessa's image and her precious Livestream numbers. You're too emotional, my mother continued, moving to put her arm around Vanessa, who had started crying on cue. You've always been too emotional. Tyler's fine. Boys need discipline. You baby him too much. I felt something crack inside my chest. The careful facade I'd been maintaining, the desperate people-pleasing, the constant anxiety about keeping everyone happy, it all shattered in that moment, and what was underneath was colder and clearer than anything I'd felt in years. Both of you, out of my house, now! Vanessa's tears stopped like someone had flipped a switch. Your house? Cameron paid for this house. Cameron pays for everything. You're just the wife. The words hung in the air like smoke. Just the wife? As if the 10 years I'd spent managing Cameron's life, raising his son, hosting his business dinners, and smiling through his mother's criticism were nothing? As if I hadn't put my own career as an interior designer on hold to support his expansion. As if I was replaceable, disposable, nothing more than an accessory to his success. I heard footsteps on the marble floor. Cameron walked in from his home office, where he'd apparently been the entire time. He took in the scene with those calculating eyes that had first attracted me at a charity gala a decade ago. Tyler crying silently against my legs, Vanessa with her perfectly applied tears, my mother's protective stance, me standing alone on one side of an invisible line. What's going on? His voice was calm, measured, the same tone he used to close million-dollar deals. Everyone started talking at once, Vanessa explaining that Tyler had been disruptive and disrespectful, my mother insisting I was having some kind of breakdown, me trying to get the words out around the rage in my throat. But Cameron held up one hand and everyone went quiet. That's the kind of power he had, the kind of power I'd forgotten I should be afraid of. He looked at his phone. At some point, someone had sent him a clip from the live stream. I watched him watch his sister-in-law slap his son. I watched his face for any sign of anger, protection, paternal instinct. Instead, I saw him calculating. I saw him thinking about optics, about family dynamics, about how this would play in the complicated game he was always running. Then he turned to me, and in his eyes I saw something that made my blood run cold. Not anger, not even disappointment, just a kind of tired annoyance, like I was a problem he'd been expecting to deal with eventually. "Grace, go upstairs. We'll talk about this later." The dismissal was so casual it took me a moment to process. He wasn't defending Tyler. He wasn't throwing Vanessa out. He was sending me away like a child being excused from the adults' table. And in that moment, I understood something I'd been too naive or too hopeful to see before. Cameron wasn't surprised by Vanessa's behavior. He wasn't shocked by my mother's response. This dynamic, this hierarchy where I was at the bottom, where Tyler and I were somehow less important than keeping Vanessa happy, this had been the plan all along. I opened my mouth to argue, to demand answers, to make him see what he was doing. But something stopped me, some instinct that told me this wasn't the moment, that I needed information before I made my move. So instead, I picked up Tyler, ignoring his whispered questions, and carried him upstairs to his room. Behind me, I heard Vanessa's relieved laugh. I heard my mother's voice soothing her, telling her I'd always been unstable, too sensitive, too much. I heard Cameron's lower tone, saying something I couldn't quite make out. And I heard the notification sounds from Vanessa's phone as the live stream comments poured in, thousands of strangers weighing in on my family's private destruction. I sat with Tyler in his room while he finally let himself cry. I held him and stroked his hair and told him he'd done nothing wrong. I told him he was perfect and loved and safe. I promised him things I wasn't sure I could deliver. And through his window, I watched the live stream event continue in our backyard, watched Vanessa return to her setup with barely a hair out of place, watched her smile, her radiant smile, and talk about overcoming negativity and setting boundaries with toxic people, watched 50 influencers nod along and 7,000 people heart react to her brave vulnerability. And I started planning. That night, Cameron didn't come to bed until after 3. When he finally did, he smelled of cigars and that same expensive perfume. He didn't try to explain, didn't apologize, didn't even acknowledge that anything had happened. He just climbed into his side of our California king and turned away from me, already scrolling through his phone. I lay there in the dark and thought about the last 3 years. The way Vanessa had gradually moved from visiting occasionally to living in our guest house temporarily that had stretched into 18 months. The way Cameron had started working later, missing dinners, forgetting Tyler's school events. The way my mother had shifted from criticizing Vanessa's choices to defending every single thing she did. The way I'd felt increasingly like a stranger in my own life, watching it happen around me instead of participating in it. Small things started clicking together. The way Cameron always knew Vanessa's schedule, the way he'd insisted on funding her influencer career when she'd hit a rough patch, the way he touched her shoulder at family dinners, just a second too long, the way Vanessa looked at him when she thought I wasn't watching, her eyes holding something that wasn't sisterly. I got out of bed so quietly Cameron didn't even stir. I went to his office, the one room in the house he thought was private because I'd never been the snooping type. I'd never been the suspicious type. I'd been the good wife who trusted her husband and supported her family and never asked uncomfortable questions. That ended tonight. His computer was logged in because he was too arrogant to think he needed to hide anything from me. I found the file folder in less than 5 minutes. Months of texts between Cameron and Vanessa, photos that made my stomach turn, hotel receipts from afternoons when he was supposedly in meetings, Venmo payments with little inside jokes that I suddenly understood weren't jokes at all. An entire relationship documented in digital breadcrumbs, hiding in plain sight. And then I found the other folder, the one labeled Exit Strategy. Inside were documents drafted by his attorney, divorce papers already prepared, just waiting for signatures, a custody arrangement that gave Cameron primary custody of Tyler based on my emotional instability and inability to handle family stress, A post-nuptial agreement I'd signed 3 years ago when he'd told me it was just for tax purposes, that now revealed itself as a financial trap that would leave me with almost nothing. Email chains discussing how to paint me as an unfit mother. Text messages with my own mother strategizing about the best way to document my episodes. They'd been planning this for months, maybe years, waiting for me to crack, to give them the ammunition they needed. And today, when I'd defended my son, when I'd finally shown some spine, I'd walked right into their trap. The live stream had captured me shoving Vanessa, my mother's statement about my emotional problems, Cameron's calm, concerned tone. They were building a narrative, and I'd just given them the climax they needed. I sat in Cameron's leather office chair, the one that cost more than most people's monthly rent, and felt something shift inside me. Not anger, not even hurt, something colder and more focused. They thought I was emotional. They thought I was weak. They thought I was just the wife, easily discarded, easily replaced. They had no idea who they were dealing with. I spent the rest of that night downloading everything from Cameron's computer onto an encrypted drive. Every text message, every photo, every financial document, every email with his attorney. I found bank accounts I didn't know existed, property deeds in Vanessa's name that Cameron had purchased, investment portfolios that should have been joint but weren't, a prenup modification that he'd forged my signature on, changing the terms without my knowledge. And I found something else, something that changed everything. Cameron's commercial real estate empire wasn't as solid as everyone thought. He'd over-leveraged on his last 3 developments, gambling with investor money. He was weeks away from defaulting on loans that would trigger a cascade of financial destruction. The only thing keeping him afloat was a deal with a group of Chinese investors that was contingent on him maintaining his image as a stable family man. If anything disrupted that image, a messy divorce, a public scandal, evidence of an affair, the investors would pull out, and his entire empire would collapse. He needed me stable and quiet. He needed the divorce to be amicable and controlled. He needed me to go away cleanly, without making waves, without asking for too much. That's why they'd been so careful with the narrative. That's why my mother was involved to make me seem unreasonable in comparison to everyone else's calm concern. They needed me to be the problem, but they also needed me to be manageable. I had been married to Cameron long enough to learn how he thought. Attack when your opponent is confident. Strike where they think they're strongest. Make them believe they're winning right until the moment you take everything. The next morning, I came downstairs wearing the mask I'd perfected over 10 years of marriage. Calm, composed, apologetic. Cameron was already at the breakfast table with his laptop, probably reviewing the live stream damage. Vanessa wasn't up yet, and my mother had gone back to her condo, likely to call all her friends and complain about her dramatic daughter. I poured coffee and sat across from him. "We should talk." He glanced up with barely concealed relief. "I'm glad you're being reasonable, Grace. Yesterday was difficult for everyone." I overreacted. I was stressed. Tyler was upset. I shouldn't have pushed Vanessa. "She's willing to forgive you," Cameron said, magnanimous, as if he was offering me a gift. "Your mother suggested maybe you should talk to someone, a therapist, just to work through some of these anger issues." A therapist who would document my issues for the custody case. Perfect. That's probably a good idea. Cameron smiled, the same smile that had charmed me at that charity gala. "I knew you'd see reason. Let's just put this behind us, okay? Focus on the family." "About that," I said carefully, "Tyler and I are going to visit my father in San Diego for a few days. Give everyone some space. Let things cool down." My father had died 5 years ago, but Cameron had been at a conference during the funeral and barely knew the details of my family. He nodded, already distracted by his emails. Good idea. Some time away will do you both good. I took Tyler out of school that afternoon, citing a family emergency. I drove us to a hotel near the airport, not the Four Seasons or Waldorf where Cameron's credit card alerts would ping, but a mid-range Marriott where no one would think to look for the wife of Cameron Holloway. I paid cash. I left my phone at home so the location services wouldn't betray me, and I started making calls. The first call was to my old college roommate Jennifer, who was now a divorce attorney in Los Angeles with a reputation for absolutely destroying unfaithful husbands. She listened to everything I had, looked at the documents I'd emailed, and when she spoke again, her voice was practically vibrating with excitement. Grace, this is insane. The forged signature alone is fraud. The hidden assets, the affair with your sister, the custody setup, we can bury him, but we have to be smart about this. How smart? I asked. Scorched earth smart, but timing is everything. The second call was to a private investigator Jennifer recommended. I gave him everything I'd found and told him to dig deeper. If Cameron had hidden assets and affairs, there would be more. There was always more. The third call was the one I'd been dreading. I called my mother's phone, but I didn't speak when she answered. I just listened as she talked to Vanessa in the background, laughing about how easily I'd folded. I told you she'd cave, my mother said. She's always been weak. Cameron can file the papers next month and we'll back up whatever story he needs. You'll be the perfect stepmother, sweetheart. Tyler will adjust. I hung up and stared at the hotel room wall while Tyler watched cartoons, oblivious to the war being planned around him. My own mother, my own sister, planning to take my son away from me, planning to replace me with Vanessa, like I was nothing more than a piece of furniture that no longer matched the decor. The fourth call was to Cameron's main investor, the one from China who was financing his latest development. I didn't identify myself. I just said I had information about potential fraud in his investment and that he should have his people look closely at the financial documents. I said I'd send proof if he was interested. He was interested. Then I waited. 3 days later, Cameron called me 37 times. I didn't answer. He sent texts demanding to know where I was, what I was doing, why I'd taken Tyler out of school. He sent my mother to the house to look for us. He filed a missing persons report that was dropped within hours when hotel security footage showed us checking in voluntarily. He was starting to panic, and panic made people sloppy. On the fourth day, Jennifer called me with news that made me smile for the first time in months. His investors pulled out. All of them. Someone sent them anonymous tips about financial irregularities, and when they audited his books, they found a mess. He's going to default on every major loan by the end of the month. His whole empire is about to collapse. Someone sent tips? I asked innocently. Funny how that works, Jennifer said. Now here's where we make our move. But before we could, something happened that I didn't expect. Tyler looked up from his coloring book in our hotel room and asked the question I'd been dreading. Mommy, why did Aunt Vanessa hit me? Why did Grandma say I deserved it? I sat next to him on the scratchy hotel bedspread and tried to find words that would make sense to an 8-year-old. Sometimes people we love make very bad choices, and sometimes we have to protect ourselves from those people, even though it hurts. Is Dottie making bad choices too? Out of the mouths of children. Yes, baby, I think he is. Tyler was quiet for a long moment. Then he leaned against my shoulder. I'm glad we left. I didn't like it there anymore. Everyone was always pretending. The wisdom of children. We'd all been pretending, wearing masks, playing roles in Cameron's perfect family theater, and my son had seen through it long before I had. That night, my phone buzzed with a restricted number. Against my better judgment, I answered. Grace. Cameron's voice was rough, exhausted. We need to talk. Face to face, please. I don't think that's a good idea. My investors pulled out. My assets are frozen. Everything is falling apart. He paused, and when he spoke again, there was something raw in his voice. Did you do this? I let the silence stretch between us. Let him wonder. Let him realize that the quiet wife he'd underestimated might have teeth after all. I protected my son. That's all I did. Grace, please, if you come back, we can fix this. I can make this right. I'll cut Vanessa off. I'll tell your mother to back off. We can start over. Start over, I repeated flatly. You mean after you and my sister finish your affair? After you take my son away from me? After you leave me with nothing while you play house with Vanessa? The silence on his end told me everything. He hadn't expected me to know, hadn't expected me to find the evidence, hadn't expected the emotional wife to be capable of this kind of strategic thinking. It's not what you think, he started, and I almost laughed at how predictable the words were. Cameron, I have every text message, every photo, every hotel receipt. I have the divorce papers you prepared. I have the forged prenup modification. I have bank statements showing money you've hidden. I have everything. And more importantly, your investors have everything. So please, tell me what I'm supposed to think. Another pause. Then, what do you want? What did I want? Revenge? Money? An apology? All of the above? I want you to listen very carefully. Tomorrow morning, you're going to transfer primary custody of Tyler to me. You're going to give me 50% of all marital assets, properly valued and disclosed. You're going to evict Vanessa from our property, and you're going to sign an agreement stating that if you or my mother or Vanessa comes within 500 feet of me or my son, I will release every piece of evidence I have to every gossip site, every news outlet, and every remaining business contact you have. Your reputation will be destroyed so thoroughly you'll never recover. You're blackmailing me. I'm protecting my family. There's a difference. And if I refuse, then I release everything now, and you can explain to bankruptcy court how you committed fraud while having an affair with your wife's sister. I'm sure that will go great for you. He could hear him breathing, calculating, trying to find an angle. There wasn't one. I'd learned from the best. You've thought of everything. I had good teachers. You and Vanessa showed me exactly how to plan someone's destruction. You just didn't think I was paying attention.
One more thing, I interrupted. When this is over, when the papers are signed and Tyler and I are safely gone from your life, I want you to think about that live stream. I want you to remember that 7,000 people watched your girlfriend slap my son while you did nothing. I want you to remember that you chose her over him, over us. And I want you to live with that choice for the rest of your life. I hung up before he could respond. The next morning, I received an email from Cameron's attorney with all the documents I'd demanded, signed and notarized. Jennifer reviewed them with the kind of glee that made me glad she was on my side. Everything was ironclad. Tyler was mine. The assets were split properly. The restraining agreement was filed with the court. We'd won, or at least we'd survived. But there was still one conversation left to have, one person who I needed to face before I could truly move forward. So, on our last day in Las Vegas, I drove Tyler to my mother's condo. I told him to wait in the car with the doors locked. Then I walked up to the front door and knocked. My mother opened it with her reading glasses on, clearly not expecting company. When she saw me, her expression cycled through surprise, guilt, and then settled on defensive anger. "Grace, I didn't know you were back in town." "I'm not. I'm leaving. But first, I wanted to give you something." I handed her a manila envelope. She opened it slowly, her face paling as she flipped through the contents. Bank statements showing how much Cameron had paid her over the last 3 years, text messages between her and Cameron discussing the best way to undermine me, her own words documented and undeniable, plotting to take my son away from me. Where did you get these? It doesn't matter. What matters is that I know. I know you chose money and Vanessa over me, over your grandson. I know you helped Cameron plan to destroy me, and I want you to know that I will never forgive you. My mother's hands were shaking. Grace, you have to understand. I was trying to help. You were so stressed, so emotional. You thought I was weak. You thought I was nothing. You thought I could be managed and manipulated and discarded. I stepped closer, and for the first time in my life, I watched my mother flinch away from me. You were wrong. What are you going to do with these? Nothing, as long as you stay away from us. But if you ever try to contact Tyler, if you ever tell anyone your version of this story, if you ever try to paint yourself as the victim, I will make sure everyone knows exactly what you did. Every friend, every neighbor, every person in your social circle. You'll be the grandmother who sold out her own daughter for money. Is that clear? She nodded, tears streaming down her face. They didn't move me. Grace, he's my grandson. You can't keep him from me. Watch me. I turned to leave, then paused at the door. By the way, Cameron's bankrupt. Vanessa's influencer career is tanking because the live stream video went viral for all the wrong reasons. Everyone saw her hit a child. Her sponsors are dropping her. So whatever you thought you were getting out of this deal, it's gone. You betrayed your daughter for nothing. I left her standing there and walked back to the car where Tyler was waiting. He looked up at me with those big eyes that had seen too much too soon. Are we going to Grandma's house? No, baby. We're going home. Where's home? Good question. Las Vegas had never really been home, had it? It had been Cameron's stage, his empire, his kingdom. Tyler and I had just been props in his show. We're going to find out together. We drove out of Las Vegas that afternoon, the city shrinking in my rearview mirror until it disappeared into desert heat shimmer. Tyler fell asleep in the back seat, exhausted from weeks of upheaval, and I drove with one hand on the wheel and one hand on the envelope of documents that represented my new life. I'd won. I'd protected Tyler. I'd taken everything Cameron thought was his and turned it into my ammunition. I'd destroyed the people who tried to destroy me, and I'd done it without raising my voice or losing my composure. I'd done it with intelligence and patience and cold, calculated fury. But as I crossed the state line into California, I felt something unexpected. Not triumph, not satisfaction, just a deep, aching sadness for the family I'd thought I had, for the life I'd believed was real, for the version of myself who had trusted too easily and loved too freely, and never imagined that the people closest to her could be planning her destruction. That Grace was gone now. The woman driving this car with her sleeping son in the back seat was someone new, someone harder, someone who knew exactly how much damage she could do if pushed far enough. I didn't know yet what we'd find at the end of this road, didn't know where we'd land or how we'd rebuild, but I knew one thing with absolute certainty. No one would ever underestimate me again. And if they tried, well, I'd learned from the very best how to smile sweetly while preparing someone's downfall, how to play the long game, how to wait for exactly the right moment to strike. Cameron and Vanessa and my mother had taught me well. They just hadn't realized I was taking notes. They hadn't realized that every humiliation, every dismissal, every moment they'd made me feel small was being filed away in a part of my brain that was learning, adapting, planning. The road stretched ahead, empty and full of possibility. Tyler stirred in the back seat, murmuring something in his sleep. And I drove toward whatever came next, no longer afraid of the future. Because the thing about surviving betrayal this complete, this carefully planned, this devastatingly personal, it burns away everything except what's essential. It shows you who you really are when all the pretending stops. And what I'd learned was this: I was my son's mother first, last, and always. Everything else was negotiable. Even family. Especially family. The coffee shop in San Diego was nothing like the places I used to frequent in Las Vegas. No marble counters or gold fixtures, no influencers posing with their oat milk lattes. Just worn wooden tables, local art on the walls, and coffee that tasted like someone actually cared about the beans. Tyler was at his new school, the small private academy where no one knew his last name or his father's reputation. Where he could be just Tyler, a smart kid who liked dinosaurs and told terrible knock-knock jokes. I'd been in California for 2 months when Jennifer called with news that made me choke on my espresso. You're not going to believe this. Vanessa's trying to sell her story to a production company. My sister stole my life, a true story of family betrayal. The audacity nearly made me laugh. She's positioning herself as the victim? It gets better. She's claiming you manipulated Cameron, isolated her from the family, and engineered his financial collapse out of jealousy of her success. Your mother is quoted in the pitch materials backing up every word. I set down my coffee carefully, willing my hands not to shake. I'd thought it was over, thought they'd learned their lesson, thought the restraining order and the evidence I held would be enough to keep them quiet. But I'd underestimated their desperation. Cameron's bankruptcy had been finalized last week. Vanessa's influencer career was in ruins, her follower count dropping by thousands daily as more people found the unedited livestream footage. My mother's social standing had evaporated when whispers started circulating about her role in the family implosion. They had nothing left except their story, and apparently they'd decided their story was worth selling, even if it meant rewriting history. "What do you need from me?" I asked Jennifer. "Nothing yet, but Grace, this is going to get ugly. If they actually sell this, if it goes to production, you'll need to decide how public you want to get with your side." I thought about Tyler, finally sleeping through the night without nightmares. Thought about the peace we'd found in our tiny apartment 3 blocks from the beach. Thought about the interior design clients I'd started taking on again, rebuilding my career one room at a time. Did I really want to drag us back into that spotlight? But then I thought about Vanessa's version becoming the official narrative. Thought about my son growing up in a world where his aunt was the victim and his mother was the villain. Thought about other women watching that show, identifying with Vanessa's manufactured tears, never knowing the truth about what really happened in that kitchen. "Set up a meeting," I told Jennifer. "I want to talk to that production company." The producer's name was Simone Reeves, and she looked exactly like I'd imagined. Sharp blazer, sharper eyes, the kind of woman who'd built a career out of other people's drama. We met at her office in Burbank, all glass and chrome and inspirational quotes about authenticity. Jennifer came with me, her briefcase full of the documentation that would either make or break this meeting. Simone got straight to the point. Vanessa's story is compelling. Beautiful influencer destroyed by her jealous sister. America loves a good villain. And frankly, Grace, you're coming across as pretty villainous in her version. "Interesting," I said. "Did she mention the affair with my husband, or the part where she slapped my 8-year-old son on a live stream that 7,000 people witnessed?" Simone's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. She characterized that as discipline that you overreacted to. She has your mother's statement backing her up. She would.
I nodded to Jennifer, who pulled out the first folder. This is 6 months of text messages between Vanessa and my husband, explicit photos, hotel receipts, financial records showing he was funding her lifestyle while hiding assets from me, evidence of them planning my divorce before I even knew there was a problem. Simone flipped through the documents, her professionally neutral expression cracking slightly. This is explosive. There's more. Jennifer pulled out the second folder. This is documentation of a conspiracy between Vanessa, Cameron, and Grace's mother to paint Grace as emotionally unstable and take custody of her son. Text messages discussing the best way to provoke reactions, emails with attorneys, a timeline of manufactured incidents designed to build a case against her. And this, I said, pulling out my phone and queuing up the unedited livestream footage, not the edited version Vanessa posted later. Watch what happens before my son spills the juice. We sat in silence while Simone watched Tyler sitting quietly at the counter, not bothering anyone. Watched Vanessa directing her assistant with increasing irritation. Watched her glance toward the kitchen with an expression that was calculating, almost predatory. Watched her wait until she had the perfect angle, the perfect lighting, before she stormed inside. The slap wasn't reactive, it was staged. She'd been looking for an excuse to create drama, and my son had accidentally given her one. "Holy hell!" Simone breathed when it finished. "My sister isn't a victim," I said quietly. "She's a performer who got caught performing. And my mother enabled her because she was living vicariously through Vanessa's influencer success. They were willing to destroy me and take my child to maintain their fantasy life. So if you want to make a show about family betrayal, make it honest. Tell the whole story, not just the version that fits Vanessa's brand." Simone leaned back in her chair, drumming her fingers on the glass desk. "If we go with your version, Vanessa will sue. Let her. Discovery will be fun." Jennifer's smile was razor sharp. "We've got 3 lawyers ready to bury her in paperwork. Plus, once this evidence becomes public record, her defamation case falls apart. She can't claim Grace destroyed her reputation when she destroyed it herself by hitting a child on camera. Your mother will fight this too." "My mother," I said, and my voice came out harder than I intended, "chose money over her grandson. She can fight all she wants. The evidence is the evidence." Simone studied me for a long moment. "You know what this will do to you. The scrutiny, the public judgment, the media circus. Everyone will have an opinion about your marriage, your parenting, your family. You'll be dissected on social media. People will send death threats. They'll dig into every aspect of your life looking for dirt. Are you ready for that?" Was I? I thought about Tyler, about the quiet life we'd built. But I also thought about all the women who'd reached out to me after the original live stream went viral. Women who'd been gaslit by their families. Women who'd been told they were too emotional, too sensitive, too much. Women who'd watched their children be hurt and been blamed for protecting them. If I stayed silent, Vanessa's version would become the truth, and those women would have one less example of someone who fought back and won. "I'm ready," I said, "but I have conditions." It took 3 weeks to negotiate the deal. I would cooperate fully with the documentary, providing all evidence and submitting to interviews. In exchange, I maintained editorial control over anything involving Tyler. His face would be blurred, his voice disguised, his privacy protected absolutely. The show would focus on the adult dynamics, the manipulation, the betrayal. My son would be a presence, but not a character. Vanessa found out about the deal when the production company's lawyers served her with a cease and desist regarding her version.
According to Jennifer, she'd thrown a spectacular tantrum in the lawyer's office, threatening lawsuits and calling in favors with sponsors who no longer returned her calls. My mother had called me 17 times in one day. I'd blocked her number after the first voicemail, where she'd cried about betrayal and family loyalty with absolutely zero self-awareness.
Cameron's response was more unexpected. He requested a meeting through his lawyer. Jennifer advised against it, but something in me needed to see him one more time, needed to look into the eyes of the man I loved and see if there was anything left worth salvaging, even just an apology, even just acknowledgement. We met at a neutral location, a hotel conference room with Jennifer and his lawyer present. Cameron looked terrible. The bankruptcy had aged him 10 years. His suit was off the rack, his watch was gone, the swagger that had defined him had collapsed into something desperate and small. "Grace," he started, and I held up my hand. "I don't want to hear your side. I don't want explanations or excuses. I agreed to this meeting because you said you had something important to tell me. So tell me." He glanced at his lawyer, who nodded encouragingly. "I want to sign over full custody of Tyler. No visitation, no parental rights. I'll disappear from his life completely." The words hit me like a slap. I'd fought so hard for custody, prepared for years of legal battles over parenting time and decision-making, and he was just giving up? Why? Because I can't give him anything now. No money, no stability, no good example. He's better off without me. Cameron's voice cracked. And because you were right, I watched Vanessa hit him and I did nothing. What kind of father does that make me? A terrible one, but I didn't say it. What about Vanessa? He laughed, but it was bitter and hollow. Vanessa left the day my accounts were frozen, moved to LA to stay with some other influencer. Haven't heard from her since except through lawyers demanding I pay debts I apparently owe her. Turns out, when the money runs out, so does the love. I should have felt vindicated, should have enjoyed watching him realize what I'd known all along. But mostly, I just felt tired. The documentary comes out in 3 months. If you cooperate, if you're honest about what happened, I'll make sure they edit you as fairly as possible. But if you fight this, if you back up Vanessa's version, I will destroy whatever's left of your reputation so thoroughly you'll never work in this city again. "I'll cooperate," he said immediately. "Grace, I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. I know I burned every bridge and broke every promise, but for what it's worth, you were always too good for me. I just convinced myself I was doing you a favor by keeping you. You weren't. You were doing yourself a favor. I made you look legitimate, stable, like a family man, instead of what you really were." What was I really? His questions sounded genuinely curious, like he actually didn't know. Empty. You were always empty, Cameron. You just filled yourself up with money and status and other people's admiration. Vanessa was the same. That's why you fit together. You were both performing for an audience, and I was just a prop in your show. I stood up, gathering my bag. Jennifer moved to follow, but I paused at the door. The saddest part? I actually loved you. The real you, whoever that was underneath all the performance. I would have stood by you through anything if you'd just been honest, if you'd just chosen us. "I know," Cameron said, and for the first time since I'd met him, he looked genuinely sorry. "I'm going to spend the rest of my life knowing I had something real, and I traded it for something fake, and I lost everything because of it." I walked out without responding. There was nothing left to say, no closure that would make it hurt less, no apology that would undo the damage. Just a man sitting in a conference room realizing too late what he'd thrown away. The documentary production was grueling. Hours of interviews where I had to relive every moment, had to watch the unedited footage of Vanessa hitting Tyler over and over while the producers asked me to describe my emotional state. Had to sit across from Simone's camera crew and explain how it felt to discover your husband and sister had been planning your destruction while you made them dinner and did their laundry and smiled for their photos. But there were unexpected allies. 3 other women came forward with stories about Vanessa. Brand deals she'd sabotaged for competitors, friendships she destroyed with manufactured drama, a pattern of manipulation and calculated cruelty that had been hidden behind her wellness influencer persona. The producers interviewed them all, building a portrait of someone who'd been performing kindness while practicing something much darker. My mother refused to participate. She released a statement through her lawyer claiming the documentary was a vendetta, that I'd always been jealous of Vanessa, that she stood by her testimony about my emotional instability. But then the producers found her old blog from before Vanessa got famous. Posts where she'd written about her disappointment in having 2 daughters when she'd wanted sons, her frustration with me for choosing interior design over something more impressive, her excitement when Vanessa showed interest in social media because, finally, one of my girls might make something of herself. The narrative she'd tried to build collapsed under the weight of her own words. She wasn't a concerned grandmother protecting her family. She was a woman who'd picked a favorite child and was willing to sacrifice the other one to maintain that choice. 3 weeks before the documentary was set to air, Vanessa posted a 30-minute video to YouTube titled My Truth. I made Jennifer watch it first to make sure there was nothing in it that would traumatize me. She called me, laughing so hard she could barely breathe. "You have to see this. It's unhinged." Vanessa had filmed herself in what looked like a low-budget apartment. Her influencer glow dimmed to something harsh under unflattering lighting. Her hair was in a messy bun, her face was bare, and she was crying the ugly kind of tears that couldn't be faked. She talked for 30 minutes about how I manipulated Cameron, how I poisoned the family against her, how I was using my media connections to destroy her career. She claimed the documentary was fiction, that the evidence was fabricated, that she'd never had an affair with Cameron. The comments section destroyed her. Thousands of people posted screenshots of her own Instagram stories where she'd accidentally included Cameron in the background, photos where they were wearing matching jewelry, timestamps that proved she'd been in hotels at the same time his credit card receipts showed he'd checked in. The internet detectives had done in hours what lawyers might have taken weeks to uncover. And then someone found her old Twitter account from before she'd gotten famous. Tweets about how boring her sister's life was, how she could do so much better if she had the same opportunities, how some people were just naturally more interesting than others, and it wasn't her fault she'd been born with star quality. The video had been meant to save her. Instead, it buried her. By the time the documentary aired, public opinion had already shifted so completely that Vanessa's name was trending next to words like narcissist and sociopath. I watched the premiere alone in my apartment after putting Tyler to bed. Jennifer had invited me to the screening party, but I couldn't face it. Couldn't watch myself on screen with a room full of strangers analyzing my trauma like it was entertainment. The documentary was titled The Perfect Life. It opened with footage of our house in Summerlin, all glass and light and expensive emptiness. Then it cut to the live stream, to that moment when Vanessa's hand connected with Tyler's face, the moment everything changed. Simone had done something brilliant with the editing. She'd interspersed the glamorous influencer footage, Vanessa's curated posts, Cameron's success stories, my mother's proud comments, with the evidence I'd provided. Text messages playing over luxury vacation photos, hotel receipts displayed next to family dinner snapshots. The contrast between the performance and the reality was devastating. My interview segments were scattered throughout, and I barely recognized myself on screen. I looked older, harder, but also somehow more real than I'd ever looked in Cameron's world. I watched myself explain the gaslighting, the isolation, the slow realization that the people I loved most were planning my destruction. And I watched myself transform from victim to survivor to something more complicated than either. The documentary didn't paint me as a hero. It showed my mistakes too. The times I'd enabled Vanessa's behavior to keep the peace, the moments I'd ignored red flags because acknowledging them would have meant acknowledging my marriage was failing, the ways I'd let my mother's criticism shape my self-worth. But it also showed the other side, the text messages from Cameron and Vanessa mocking me, the recorded phone calls with my mother discussing how to document my episodes, the financial documents proving they'd been planning to leave me with nothing, the unedited live stream footage showing Vanessa's calculated cruelty. And it showed the aftermath, not just my victory, but the cost of it. The nights Tyler woke up crying, the therapy sessions, the slow, painful process of rebuilding trust and identity. The documentary didn't end with triumph. It ended with me and Tyler on the beach, building a sandcastle while the waves erased our footprints behind us. The final scene was my interview, shot in silhouette against a sunset. Simone's voice from behind the camera. If you could say anything to women going through something similar, what would it be? I'd thought about this question for days before filming, thought about all the perfect, inspirational things I could say. But when the camera rolled, what came out was raw and honest, and maybe not what anyone expected. I'd tell them that protecting yourself and your children isn't selfish, that leaving isn't giving up, that sometimes the people who are supposed to love you are the ones who hurt you the worst, and that's not your fault. I'd tell them to document everything, trust their instincts, and find people who believe them. I'd tell them that survival isn't pretty, that justice doesn't always feel good, and that some relationships can't be saved, they can only be escaped from. And I'd tell them that on the other side of that escape is something they might have forgotten existed: peace. The screen faded to black. Credits rolled. I sat in my dark living room with tears streaming down my face, and I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Not happiness exactly, not satisfaction, something quieter and more permanent. Relief. The documentary exploded. Within 48 hours, it was the #1 show on the streaming platform.
Think pieces appeared in every major publication. Support groups formed online for women dealing with family manipulation. Legal experts analyzed the evidence on talk shows. Vanessa's remaining sponsors dropped her. My mother's friends reportedly stopped calling. And Cameron, true to his word, disappeared. He moved out of Las Vegas to somewhere in the Midwest, started over with nothing. I heard through Jennifer that he'd taken a job in commercial property management, a step down so massive from where he'd been that people who knew him couldn't believe it was the same person. The most surprising response came from Tyler's school. Other mothers started approaching me, carefully at first, then with increasing courage. They told me their own stories: husbands who gaslit them, in-laws who undermined them, sisters who competed with them, family members who chose sides instead of truth. They thanked me for showing that it was possible to fight back, that it was possible to win. I didn't feel like a winner. I felt like a survivor, which was different. Winners celebrated. Survivors just kept breathing. 6 months after the documentary aired, I got an email that made me stare at my laptop screen for 10 minutes trying to process what I was reading. It was from Vanessa. No subject line, just 3 words in the body. "I'm sorry, Grace." I showed it to Jennifer, who immediately advised me not to respond. It's a trap. She's trying to get you to engage so she can twist your words for whatever comeback she's planning. But something in those 3 words felt different.
felt tired and defeated and maybe, possibly, genuine. Against Jennifer's advice, I wrote back, "Sorry for what, specifically?" Her response came an hour later. It was long, rambling, and more honest than anything she'd said to me in years. She talked about growing up in my shadow, always the pretty one but never the smart one, never the one our father praised, about how our mother's favoritism had felt like love until she realized it was just another kind of manipulation, about how she'd convinced herself that taking Cameron wasn't betrayal because I didn't appreciate him anyway, about how she'd believed her own lies until the live stream video forced her to see what she'd become. She didn't ask for forgiveness, didn't expect reconciliation, just wanted me to know that she knew what she'd done, that she was living with it, that she'd started therapy and was working on understanding why she'd needed to destroy me to feel valuable. I read the email 3 times before responding. "I believe you're sorry. I believe you're working on yourself. But Vanessa, you hit my son. You planned to take him away from me. There are things you can apologize for and things you just have to live with. This is the second kind." She never wrote back. I heard through mutual acquaintances that she'd moved to Oregon, was working as a receptionist at a dental office, had quit social media entirely. Sometimes I wondered if she'd really changed, or if she was just waiting for her moment to reinvent herself again. But mostly, I didn't think about her at all. My mother was a different story. She never apologized, never acknowledged what she'd done. Instead, she sent Tyler birthday cards and Christmas presents that I returned unopened. She told relatives I was keeping her from her grandson out of spite. She posted on Facebook about the pain of being alienated from family, with photos of Tyler from before, painting herself as the victim of my cruelty. I blocked her on everything, changed our phone numbers, made sure the school knew she wasn't allowed to pick Tyler up, and I tried not to feel guilty about it, though some days that was harder than others. She was my mother. Despite everything, part of me still wanted her to be different, to choose me, just once, to see what she'd done and feel sorry. But people don't change just because we need them to. Sometimes they just are who they are, and the kindest thing we can do for ourselves is accept that and walk away. Tyler turned 9, then 10. He stopped having nightmares about that day, started sleeping with his door open instead of locked, made friends who knew him as just Tyler, not as the kid from the viral video. He asked about his father sometimes, and I told him the truth in age-appropriate ways, that Cameron had made very bad choices, that adults sometimes hurt people even when they don't mean to, that we were safer and happier now, even though happy looked different than we'd planned. My interior design business grew steadily. I worked with clients who'd seen the documentary and specifically wanted to hire me. "I want someone who understands that a home should be a safe place," one woman told me, "not just a pretty place." I designed spaces that felt like sanctuaries, rooms where people could exhale, houses that didn't perform for anyone. And slowly, carefully, I started dating again. Nothing serious at first, just coffee dates and casual dinners with men who didn't remind me of Cameron, who asked about my son instead of my connections, who split the check instead of making a show of paying, who understood that trust was something earned slowly, not demanded immediately. I met David at a client's housewarming party. He was a high school history teacher, divorced with 2 kids of his own. He wore jeans with paint stains and drove a Honda with nearly 200,000 miles on it. He'd never seen the documentary, didn't know my story. When I finally told him, over coffee number 5, he listened quietly and then said something that made me fall a little bit in love with him. That must have been terrifying. But look at you now. Look at what you built from it. Not, "You're so strong," or "I'm sorry that happened," or any of the other platitudes people offered. Just acknowledgement of the fear and recognition of the aftermath. just seeing me as a whole person instead of a victim or a survivor or a story. We took it slow, introduced the kids after 6 months, made sure Tyler felt safe and heard in every decision. David never tried to be his father, just became a steady, kind presence who showed up when he said he would and meant what he said. After years of performance and manipulation, his consistency felt like magic. 2 years after the documentary aired, Jennifer called with unexpected news. "You're not going to believe this. Vanessa's writing a book." My first instinct was rage, another attempt to cash in on our family's destruction, another version of events where she was the real victim. But Jennifer quickly corrected me. "No, wait, it's not what you think. It's called Performing Pain, a memoir of manufactured identity. It's about influencer culture and narcissism and the cost of living for likes. Early reviews are saying it's actually good, honest. She's dedicating it to you." What? The dedication says, "For Grace, who survived what I did and somehow became more than I ever could be." I didn't know how to process that, didn't know if it was genuine growth or just another performance. But I also realized I didn't need to know. Vanessa's journey was hers, mine was mine, and they didn't have to intersect anymore. I didn't buy the book.
Didn't read reviews or follow the press tour. But I heard it did well, that Vanessa had found an audience of other people recovering from narcissistic behavior patterns, that she'd become a cautionary tale, and maybe, possibly, an example of change. Whether it was real or not didn't matter to me anymore. I'd moved on. The second anniversary of the documentary's release fell on a Saturday. David suggested taking the kids to the beach, but Tyler had other plans. "Mom, can we just stay home? I want to show you something." He led me to his room, which he'd been keeping mysteriously closed for the last few weeks. When he opened the door, I gasped. He'd drawn a mural on his wall. I'd given him permission to paint it however he wanted, and what he'd created was stunning. A massive tree with roots digging deep and branches reaching high, and in each branch, a different scene from our life. The old house in Vegas, the hotel room where we'd hidden, our apartment by the beach, his new school, me and him building sandcastles, David teaching him to throw a baseball, our little makeshift family gathered around a dinner table. "It's our story," Tyler explained. "Mrs. Chen in art class said stories don't have to be happy to be beautiful, and I wanted to remember all of it, even the hard parts, because they made us who we are." I wrapped my arms around my brilliant, sensitive, impossibly wise son and let myself cry. Not sad tears, not even happy tears exactly, just the kind of tears that come when you realize that despite everything that went wrong, despite all the people who betrayed you and all the ways life shattered and reformed, you somehow ended up exactly where you needed to be. That night, after Tyler was asleep and David had gone home to his own kids, I sat on my balcony overlooking the ocean. I thought about Grace from 3 years ago, standing in that kitchen watching her sister hit her son. How terrified she'd been, how small she'd felt, how certain she was that she'd lose everything if she fought back. I wanted to reach back through time and tell her it would be okay, that she was stronger than she knew, that the people she was afraid to lose weren't worth keeping, that the perfect life she was mourning had never been real anyway, just a performance she'd mistaken for substance. I wanted to tell her that justice wouldn't feel like victory, that winning would hurt almost as much as losing, that the people she loved would disappoint her in ways she never imagined possible. But I also wanted to tell her that she'd survive it, that her son would be okay, that she'd find real love eventually, the kind that didn't require constant performance or careful management, that she'd build something authentic from the ruins of something fake. Mostly, I wanted to tell her to trust herself. To believe what she saw with her own eyes, instead of letting other people rewrite her reality. To know that her instincts were right.
even when everyone else said she was wrong. To understand that sometimes the kindest thing you can do for yourself is to walk away from people who treat your kindness as weakness. But I couldn't reach back through time. That Grace had to find her own way, make her own choices, learn her own lessons, just like we all do. What I could do was sit here on this balcony, in this modest apartment that belonged to me and only me, listening to the ocean and thinking about tomorrow, about the client consultation I had scheduled, about the parent-teacher conference for Tyler, about the dinner date with David where we'd probably talk about maybe, possibly moving in together eventually, taking it slow because we both knew what happens when you rush. What I could do was exist in this moment, imperfect and complicated and real, and know that I'd earned it, not by being perfect or strong or any of the things people called me after the documentary, but by being human, by making mistakes and learning from them, by failing and getting back up, by protecting what mattered and letting go of what didn't. The documentary ended with me talking about peace. But peace isn't an ending, it's just a different kind of beginning, the kind where you get to decide who you are instead of letting other people decide for you, where you get to choose authenticity over performance, even when performance would be easier, where you get to build something real, even if it's smaller and quieter and less impressive than what you had before. Tyler's mural was right. Stories don't have to be happy to be beautiful. They don't have to have fairy tale endings to be worth telling. Sometimes the most important stories are the ones about surviving, rebuilding, and discovering that you're more than what happened to you. I went inside and locked the door behind me, checked on Tyler one more time, watching his peaceful face in the glow of his nightlight. He'd drawn a small addition to his mural, just above his bed. 2 figures holding hands, one big and one small, walking toward a sunrise. Above them, in his careful handwriting, "We made it, Mom." Yes, baby, we made it. And that, in the end, was everything.